Good evening, everyone, and welcome once again to our Bhagavad-gita Satsang. I'm Hari-kirtana Das, and it is a pleasure for me to be here with you, an honor for me to have you here with me. Thank you very much for choosing to spend some time with me, and thank you very much for raising your hand in order to let me know that I can be heard. Yay, thank you very, very much. It is very nice to see you all here. Let's take care of a little bit of housekeeping and we will get on with the show. So for those of you who are new to the satsang, you can adjust your audio settings and your viewing options in the upper right-hand corner. You need not concern yourself with your microphone or your camera because you can see and hear me, but I can neither see nor hear you. If you would like to make yourself heard, there's a Q&A box. I would be very, very happy to see any of your questions or comments as we move through this evening's class. Our last class was the end of chapter 9, the Yoga of Royal Secrets. We spoke about how Krishna sees his devotees. We dealt with a showstopper from the Bhagavad-gita, at least what I call showstoppers. We reviewed the whole chapter and revealed the most secret of secret secrets. And we will review that last verse, verse 34 of verses 30 through 34 that we covered last week. This evening, we move on to chapter 10, the Yoga of Divine Presence, also known as the opulence of the Absolute. We will look at the first 7 verses of this chapter as we transition into the second half of the Bhagavad-gita. We will hear a little bit about Krishna's motivation, and Krishna will begin to explain how to see and understand himself, Krishna. So that's where we're going this evening. Before we go anywhere, we will chant our invocation mantra together. So if you are new to transliterated Sanskrit, the dot over the M indicates closing the back of one's tongue to the back of the roof of one's mouth. At the same time, one brings one's lips together out front. The bar over a vowel, in this case an A, indicates a long open version of that vowel as opposed to a short and truncated version. So here we go. I chant, you chant back. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So picking up where we left off last week. Our last verse, verse 34, translates as, direct your mind toward me, become my devotee, offer your sacrifices to me, and act in reverence for me. Thus you will surely come to me, having completely absorbed yourself in me alone. So this is the pinnacle verse, the crescendo and most important verse in the Bhagavad-gita, appearing practically right in the center of the Bhagavad-gita. So from the standpoint of its hermeneutical consideration, we began the Bhagavad-gita with the question, what did they do? How did they act? Or how did those assembled on the battlefield respond to their destiny? And here Krishna is giving his prescription as to how we should respond to our destiny, whatever our destiny may be. And from here, we will move into a chapter that is an elaboration of this most important verse. The first 7 are introductory in a way, and they will set up the 4 verses to follow, 8 through 11, which will be next week. So I will read through the translation of each of these verses, and then we will go back and look at each verse in detail. So here we go. This is verse 1 of chapter 10. The Blessed Lord said, "O mighty armed one, hear once again my supreme counsel. Because you are my beloved friend, I shall speak to you further, for I desire your well-being." Text number 2. Neither the gods nor the great sages understand how I have come to be, for I, in all respects, am the source of all the gods and great sages. Text number 3. Those who understand me as unborn, beginningless, and the supreme Lord of all the worlds, they alone are undiluted among mortals and are freed from all misfortune. Texts 4 and 5 together. Discernment, knowledge, freedom from delusion, forgiveness, truthfulness, control of the mind and senses, serenity, happiness and distress, birth and death, and fear and fearlessness as well. Non-violence, impartiality, satisfaction, austerity, charity, fame and infamy. All these conditions and their various forms that may appear in living beings arise from me alone. Verse number 6. The 7 great sages of antiquity, as well as the 4 prior to them, and the progenitors from whom all living beings in this world descend, are born from me as emanations from my mind. Verse 7. One who knows the truth about my immeasurable mystic power remains united with me through an unwavering yoga practice. Of this, there is no doubt. So those are our 7 verses that we will focus on this evening. Let's take a look at each of them in some detail. So once again, the first verse of the 10th chapter. The Blessed Lord, Krishna, said, "O mighty armed one, Arjuna, hear once again my supreme counsel. Because you are my beloved friend, I shall speak to you further, for I desire your well-being." So this will not just be a repetition, but rather this will be a deeper entry into how to appreciate the width, depth, and breadth of who and what Krishna is. Back in the 7th chapter, Krishna spoke a little bit about his opulences and how one may see him. The fact that he is synonymous with the sound Om, that everything rests on him like pearls strung on a thread, etc. So in this chapter, Krishna will go even deeper into this sort of thing. And therefore he says, I will speak to you further, not just again, but further. So the understanding here is that Krishna is now going to give a kind of commentary on the most important verse that we just read again, that concluded the 9th chapter, in order to illuminate that verse even further and to reveal how one can execute the instructions of that verse. So Krishna is going to speak about himself. And normally, one who speaks about themselves all the time might be considered self-absorbed. I can speak from personal experience. It actually takes and continues to take some work for me to get out of my own head and not just think about what I'm doing and actually pay attention to others. Because I'm just a self-absorbed person by nature, I've had to work a little bit to kind of let that go. And now that I've made a little bit of progress there, I can understand why someone would have thought I was a total crashing bore, because all I could really think to talk about was me and what I'm doing. And those of you who know me could probably tell me, actually, I still do that. And I wouldn't be offended if you did, because I know that's just kind of a habit. Anyway, besides me, I'm sure you know others who can speak of nothing but themselves. And normally you would lose interest in that person rather quickly. This is one of the many ways where Krishna is the exception to that rule, because he's actually really interesting. And those who have developed an interest in Krishna, that is to say, those who are engaged in the practice of devotional yoga as Krishna has described it, don't actually get tired of hearing about him. It's purifying to the consciousness to hear about the Supreme Person. The Supreme Person's name. We chant mantra meditation, purifying to the consciousness. The form, to actually see the form of Krishna, the most amazing possible form, because for one thing, it seems impossible for the limitless to have a form which would indicate some kind of a boundary, an inside and an outside. But here's the amazing thing about Krishna's form. There's no difference between his inside and his outside. Unlike us, Krishna is his form. We've already established that one of the differences between us and Krishna is that we are spiritual beings in a material body. And Krishna is a spiritual being who doesn't have a material body. His form is a transcendently spiritual form. And the human form that we have is derived from Krishna's human-like form, as opposed to an anthropomorphic projection of a form on that which has no form. At least that is how Krishna has presented himself, and if we are to take him at his word, then that's what we accept. The qualities of Krishna are quite amazing, and Krishna is going to elaborate on those qualities later in this chapter. The activities of Krishna are quite extraordinary. The activity that we are studying, his speaking of the Bhagavad-gita, is the activity of revealing the most confidential knowledge, the pinnacle of philosophy. the more one hears about the Supreme Person, the more one feels inspired to engage in a relationship with the Supreme Person. And Arjuna is feeling enlivened to hear Krishna speak about himself. When you're really interested in someone, when you meet someone who's genuinely fascinating, the most interesting man in the world, anyway, you actually do want to hear about them. You want them to talk about themselves, because if their lives are extraordinary and they're entertaining speakers, then you're genuinely interested. You want to hear more. And in this case, because the speaker is Krishna and the subject is Krishna, then hearing is devotional yoga. So the first process of devotional yoga, in fact, is hearing. So Krishna is facilitating Arjuna's engagement in devotional yoga by speaking about himself, and by extension, facilitating our engagement in devotional yoga by now elaborating, going further about himself, the ultimate topic. And here he's also revealing his motivation. For I desire your well-being. So Krishna knows that for us to hear about him is actually in our best interest. And developing an interest, a taste for hearing about Krishna is also in our best interest, because it awakens the spiritual senses. Transcendental subject matter awakens our spiritual senses, just like an alarm clock wakes up our external senses when we're sleeping. So it has the same effect. And this is very nice to know, that Krishna is going out of his way to tell us about himself for our sake, not for his. He doesn't have anything to gain by talking about himself. He's the Supreme Being. But because he is interested in our well-being, therefore, he goes out of his way to give us an opportunity to hear about him. So now we have some understanding of what's going to happen in this chapter, how Krishna is going to elaborate on the verse that closed out the previous chapter, and Krishna has told us why he is going to reveal even deeper, more detailed information about himself, namely because he desires our well-being. So if you have any comments or questions about the first verse, please go ahead and pop them in the Q&A. Amy, it's nice to see you again. And we'll move on to our second verse. So once again, neither the gods, referring to the demigods. We have discussed that in the cosmology of the Gita, the universe is populated with living beings who are on a spiritual level, like you and I. They are jivas. They are here in the material world, and we could take our birth as one of these gods or demigods if we played our karma right. Neither the gods nor the great sages understand how I have come to be, for I, in all respects, am the source of all the gods and great sages. So here Krishna is echoing something that was spoken previously, the 30th verse of the 7th chapter, where he describes that those whose minds are absorbed in thoughts of me, who know me to be the highest principle of divinity, as well as the governing principle of the material manifestation, of all the demigods and of all methods of sacrifice can know me even at the time, of death. So Krishna has already established that all the demigods kind of roll up to him. Any powers that any God has in this material world are bestowed by Krishna. Ultimately, it comes from him. So here, he is saying that he is the source of the gods and the sages, and therefore, the gods and the sages are limited insofar as they cannot really wrap their heads around the source of their being. So here's a few important things about this particular verse. The demigods hold a very elevated position in the hierarchy of the material world. They have important responsibilities in the administration of universal affairs, but their position is not a qualification for understanding the nature of Krishna. The sages are characterized by renunciation. So it isn't that the demigods have some great attachments and material desires and therefore they're not able to understand Krishna. Because those who are renounced, those who have no material desires, they can't understand him either. And the other characteristic of the great sages is knowledge, scholarship. They are well versed in transcendental knowledge, and yet, even though they are great scholars, still can't understand Krishna. So, social position, renunciation, and academic accomplishment. None of these are qualifications for understanding Krishna. They may be helpful in this way or that way, but Krishna assures us here that the gods and great sages are limited in their understanding of him. And what this means, that limitation, is that they are not completely aware of the transcendental nature of Krishna's form or his qualities or his attributes, his activities, his relationships, or his abode, his own spiritual dwelling. So Krishna is the cause and the ultimate source and the essence of the intelligence and power possessed by the sages and the gods. And their intelligence and their power are limited relative to the entitlement that they have due to their past karma. And that power and intelligence is awarded by Krishna in direct what's the word I'm looking for? In direct correspondence, proportion to the merits that the sages and gods have accrued karmically in their past activities. So, one may ask, if the demigods and the great sages have trouble understanding Krishna, well then how are we going to do it? Well, Krishna is going to tell us. And we are going to chant the next verse together, which is verse number 3 of the 10th chapter. The diacritical marks in the transliterated Sanskrit for this verse, once again indicating that there are long open A's where you see the bars across the top. The C is always a CH sound. So wherever you see a C, we get a CH sound. The accent mark over an S indicates an SH sound, but an SH sound that is pronounced deeper in the back of one's mouth as opposed to right behind one's teeth. So a regular SH sound is sh, and the accent mark over the SH sound is sh. The dot under a D indicates that that D will be pronounced a little further back in the mouth. So you'll, instead of flicking the tip of your tongue right behind your teeth, duh, you will bring your tongue back to the center of the roof of your mouth, duh. And the dot under the S is a regular SH sound. And we need not worry about the dots under the H's because none of those H's are at the end of a word. That's at the end of a line. And that's when the rule for the dot under the H kicks in, which normally would be an echoing back of the vowel that preceded it. So with that in mind, I chant one line at a time and you chant each line back. Yo mama jammanadim cha Vetti loka maheshwaram asammudha samartyeshu sarva papai pramuchyate. Very good. Here's our translation. Those who understand me as unborn, beginningless, and the supreme Lord of all the worlds, they alone are undiluted among mortals and are freed from all misfortune. So let's take a second look at the Sanskrit. The key words that I want to focus on are ajam, anadim, and lokamaheshwaram. Just looking at this for a moment, for those of you who are watching on the screen, the word maheshwaram is actually a compound word consisting of the two words maha, meaning great, and ishwaram, indicating Ishvara, or the supreme person. Ish coming from a root indicating controller or sovereign, ultimate ruler. So when you put them together, you get Maheshwaram, the A at the end of Maha and the I at the beginning of Ishvara merged together into a third vowel, this in this case, an E sound. So here's why we're focusing on those particular words, and then we'll take a look at the end of the verse as well. So Aja means unborn. And you may recall all the way back in the beginning of the Bhagavad-gita that we, you and I, are also described in this way, unborn. In the second chapter, Krishna says that the soul, the person, the Atma, you and I, we are never come into being and we never go out of being. Unborn, ever existing, and primeval. The Atma, the soul, is not slain when the body is slain. Okay, so that sounds a lot like, well, you know, Krishna and us, you know, we're kind of the same. But there's an important difference. We are unborn by our nature. However, we have come into an unnatural condition, which is to say we inhabit bodies that are born, stay for some time, and then die. And that doesn't happen to Krishna. Krishna does not take on a material form. Krishna's form is spiritual. There's a difference between me and my body, and you and your body. But there is no difference between Krishna and Krishna's body. And in our pure spiritual swarup, or nature, our actual true state of being, we are also not different from our form. The difference between Krishna and us is that we're marginal. We can come under the influence of material nature, which is one of Krishna's energies that he is in control of, whereas we are controlled by the material energy. So one should not think that, oh, I am Aja, Krishna is Aja, therefore I am Krishna, or, we are just like Krishna. There is an important distinction to be made here. Not only that, but here we understand that Krishna is both unborn and beginningless, which is indicated by the word anadim. So anadim indicates that he existed before the cosmic manifestation. And we also existed, but in a dormant state, waiting for the next time that the material world would be in session. There's a nice line from a verse in the Brahma Samhita, Anadir Adir Govindam, so indicating Govinda, Krishna, is present before the creation comes into session. So it also indicates that Krishna's existence before the cosmic manifestation is, that is to say, before the primal breath of creation. So when the cosmic manifestation is not in session, nothing exists except the resonant sound of Om, which vibrates within the heart of the expansion of Krishna, Karana Dakshayi Vishnu, the technical term, but the Mahavishnu, the great Vishnu from whom all the universes of the material world are understood to emanate. And when that sound becomes vocalized, that is to say, not just from within the heart, but emanates outside of the form of Vishnu, that's when the world comes back into being, Om being the fundamental sound vibration of creation. So even when he comes into the material world, Krishna remains the same Aja, or unborn, and the same Anadim, beginningless person. And that's also now distinct from us, different from us. And then last, Loka Maheshwaram was the other word that we highlighted. Loka, location or world, is the commonly understood and accepted translation of Loka, world. And Maha means great, Ishvara means Lord. So Krishna is saying that he is the supreme Lord of all the world, or worlds. And that's definitely not us. So Krishna is all three of these things: unborn, beginningless, and the supreme Lord of all the worlds. Therefore, in a unique position, no one else can actually say that they are all three of these, and nobody we know, in all likelihood, all right, I'll grant there may be some exceptions, but most of the people we know are not free from the influence of material nature. So therefore, this is how Krishna is unique. Then the last word, let's go back. Let me share my screen again with you. So the last line, sarva papai pramuchyate. So this is going to indicate that, come back. This is going to indicate freedom from all misfortune. So misfortune means material consciousness, or particularly, more specifically, it means the experience of the reactions to our past actions, or our karma. We have a variety of different kinds of karma that we are dealing with. We've got the karma that we are dealing with right now. That is to say, the karma that has reached its fruition. But before a fruit can be ripe, it has to be not ripe. So there's karma that's just down the road a little ways that we haven't experienced yet, but it's coming soon. It'll be ripe soon. It'll come to fruition soon. And then prior to that, there's the little fruit in a bud-like form. And that's a little further down the road. And then further than that is the karma that's just starting to sprout, the karma that's really almost latent within the plant from which the fruit comes. And then there's the seed. Every time we act, we're planting a seed of future karma. And to be freed from all misfortune is to be freed from all of that karma. Not just what's coming down the pike in a little while, but to have the seeds of our future karma burnt up so that they can no longer realize their potential in the form of a reaction that we are obliged to experience. So this is pretty wonderful. That anyone who can do what the gods and sages apparently cannot do will be freed from all misfortune. Well, it must be possible, even though the demigods and the sages can't wrap their heads around Krishna. There must be some way for this to happen. Otherwise, why would Krishna be telling us this? Any questions about this? Please pop them in the Q&A box. And while I wait for your questions, we'll move on to verses 4 and 5. So remember, we put these together. This is all kind of one thought going on here. Discernment, knowledge, freedom from delusion, forgiveness, truthfulness, control of the mind and senses, serenity, happiness and distress, birth and death, and fear and fearlessness as well, nonviolence, impartiality, satisfaction, austerity, charity, fame and infamy. All these conditions and their various forms that may appear in living beings arise from me alone. So this is a really curious verse. Some of you may recognize some elements of the yamas and niyamas in the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, such as truthfulness, nonviolence, satisfaction or contentment, austerity, tapas. So the first two words are particularly significant: discernment and knowledge, buddhi and jnana in the Sanskrit. Buddhi or jnanam is the way it's phrased in the verse, means the ability to discriminate between spirit and matter, to recognize that which is eternal and that which is temporary, and not only know the difference between them, but to recognize their respective value. That is, to say that, to have an understanding that that which is eternal is true, real, or more real, and hence more valuable than that which is, in a sense, false or illusory, less real, a less real reality than the real reality. The other thing that's interesting about this, I think, is that Krishna talks about how all these different conditions in living beings arise from him. We tend to think, I'm the one doing this. I am the one being generous by giving charity. I am the one who's being renounced by engaging in austerity. I am the one who's afraid or fearless. I am the one who's being truthful. I'm the one who's controlling my mind and senses, etc., etc., etc. And here Krishna is saying, nope, not you. You're not actually the person from whom this is being generated. All of these different states of being are actually coming from Krishna. So back in 327, chapter 3, verse 27, we heard that one who is bewildered by the influence of false ego thinks, I am the doer of activities. Whereas in actuality, all these activities are being carried out by the three qualities of material nature. And then later in the 7th chapter, in the 14th verse, Krishna explains a little bit about material nature. My divine power of illusion, composed of the qualities of material nature, is nearly impossible to overcome, but those who offer themselves to me can easily cross beyond this bewildering power. So here, Krishna is starting to make a distinction between advancement that we make under our own power by our own effort and advancement that we make on the path of spiritual life that comes as a matter of grace. There's a kind of classic story or comparison, I should say, not so much a story. A baby monkey that wants to get a ride through the trees on its mother, then it has to make the effort to grab on to the mother's body. And then as the mother moves around, the monkey's got to hang on. So it's by the baby monkey's effort. Whereas if a kitten wants to get a ride from its mother, then the mother cat simply comes and picks up the kitten with her teeth and carries the kitten, and the kitten doesn't do anything. There's no effort involved. In fact, the degree to which the kitten surrenders to being carried, to that extent, it's easy for the kitten to get where they want to go, and easy for the mother cat to get the kitten there. So the path of grace, as opposed to the path of effort, is like the surrender of the kitten to being carried by its mother cat, as opposed to the baby monkey that by its own effort gets where it's going by clinging on to the body of its mother. So this does not absolve us of responsibility to do our part, to make an effort. But the hard part is in understanding that whatever effort we make, the results of that effort are not being generated by our effort. They are being awarded, given to us as a gift by the ultimate source of all such gifts, namely Lokamaheshwara, the great Lord of all the worlds. Just as Krishna is the ultimate source of the power, status, and intelligence of the demigods and sages, whatever results of our own efforts on the path of yoga, those are also being bestowed on us by Krishna. not so much by our effort. As soon as we think I am the one who is doing, then our ego is getting in the way, and then we're like a squirming kitten, making it difficult for our mama cat to take us where we want to go. All righty. Which brings us to our next two verses. So verse number 6. The 7 great sages of antiquity, as well as the 4 prior to them, and the progenitors from whom all living beings in this world descend, are born from me as emanations from my mind. So there's an understanding that Brahma is the first created being in the material universe. And he is also known as Aja, which is to say unborn, insofar as his birth is extraordinary because he appears directly from the lotus flower that blossoms from the navel of the expansion of Lord Vishnu, who enters into the universe and enters into each universe. From Brahma, there are 4 sages. First, the 4 Kumaras are their official title. And then beyond these 4 Kumaras, there are 7 other sages. They are not specifically named here. They are referred to in other Vedic texts. And then the progenitors of all living beings are known as manus. This is the Sanskrit word from which the English word man or mankind is actually derived. So there are 14 manus. So you have 25, 7 plus 4 plus 14, 25 people who are the first wave of created beings, plus Brahma, if you want to count him, in the material world. And Krishna is saying that they are part of his design for how the universe rolls out. Brahma is the engineer of the universe. The design is illuminated from within him by Vishnu. After a long period of meditation, Brahma's purpose is revealed to him, and the knowledge of how to execute his mission is also revealed to him. So this is a reference to the design for rolling out the universe that is awakened in the mind of Brahma by Vishnu, who we understand is an expansion of Krishna, and how Vishnu is an expansion of Krishna, or Krishna is an incarnation of Vishnu, is a whole other class. But here, Krishna, who is before Arjuna, seems to be indicating quite clearly that beyond the various Vishnu expansions from which the material world comes into being and rolls out in each of their individual cases, it is he, Krishna, behind the whole thing. Which brings us to the 7th verse. One who knows the truth about my immeasurable mystic power remains united with me through an unwavering yoga practice. Of this, there is no doubt. So, this now is a little foreshadowing of what's to come. Because now we want to know what's the truth of Krishna's immeasurable mystic power, so that we can remain united with Krishna in unwavering yoga practice. This verse acts as impetus for Arjuna to make a request that will cover verses 16 through 18 of this chapter. He will ask Krishna, okay, well, tell me about it. I'm excited to hear about this. This is awesome. I'm paraphrasing. But you get the idea. Now, here's the thing. One who knows the truth, the word Krishna uses here is tattva, which means truth as in reality, an absolute component of reality would be a tattva. It's one thing to understand something in theory. It's another thing to realize it, have some experience of it, and then there's acceptance. I may understand something is true, but I may also somehow or other convince myself to live in denial of this, to act in such a way as if it weren't true. And if I really, really understood it, then I would feel inspired to act in accordance with that which I have understood. So that's why there's no doubt that if one actually, truly understands and appreciates who Krishna is, the extent of his mystic power, the just basically mind-blowingness of what it means to be omniscient and all-powerful and ever-present, always and forever. When we are open to the possibility that there actually is such a person, then a thoughtful person will want to hear more about this person, because what could be more exciting than that? I saw a documentary film some years ago. I don't remember the name of it. It was about a group of monks in a monastery in Belgium. Very remote, living, for all intents and purposes, in a past century. And towards the end of the documentary, the filmmaker asked one of the monks, "Don't you get bored here? Does it ever get dull? Do you ever hanker for finding out what's happening in the world, or going to town and doing something?" And the monk started laughing and said to the filmmaker, "I am developing my relationship with God. What could be more exciting than that?" It is a rare person who actually does get excited about that. Last week, someone was on and asked, like, why is this a secret? It seems like it's right here in the book. You know, anyone can read this. It's not like the Bhagavad-gita was written yesterday. It's not like Krishna is saying, don't tell anybody. Here it is. And yet, Sa Mahatma Sadurlabha, such a great soul. Once again, the word Maha, but this time in connection to Atma, a great soul. According to Krishna, a great soul is someone who actually gets excited about the idea of finding out about him and learning more and learning where to see and how to experience the presence of the omnipresent Supreme Person at every moment. Someone who gets jazzed about that is considered a truly exceptional person. And we see that it's very, very rare that someone does get excited about that and makes that the overriding priority of their life. And of those who do take that up, very few special people can make the level of commitment or have made the level of commitment in past lives that have brought them to the point where they actually have this kind of experience. And Krishna is saying that that's available to everyone. In the last chapter, he made it unmistakably clear that there's no limit on who can do this. There's no, nobody's disqualified except those who are envious of me and inimical to me. But other than that, anyone who feels an attraction to me, I am already feeling an attraction for them, and I am ready, willing, and able to accept their approach to me from any angle. So that brings us to the end of this section of chapter 10. Whoops, and that wasn't tonight's class. Well, that's the one slide I missed, I guess. Our class actually this evening was the beginning of chapter 10, the Yoga of Divine Presence, or the opulence of the Absolute. We heard about Krishna's motivation, his desire for our well-being, and we got started on how to see and understand Krishna, which is the preamble to the next few verses. We covered verses 1 through 7, and if you have any questions, we have a few minutes left. I would be very, very happy to entertain your questions or comments. If you have questions or comments that arise later, or if you were watching this later, you can write to me at Hari@Hari-kirtana.com. I'll be very, very happy to receive your correspondence, and I look forward to hearing from you. One public service announcement. On the evening of Monday, March 25th, I will be giving a talk online on the yamas and niyamas. That'll be part of the yoga seminar, which is a series that is run by Embodied Philosophy. You can find them on Facebook. You can find them on their website, Embodied Philosophy. And if you would like to attend, this is part of a monthly membership in Embodied Philosophy's Yoga Seminar Series. There are hours and hours, like 60 different classes that you can get, not just mine. If you are interested and would like to tune in, the bit.ly link is HKD, this is all lowercase, HKD-yamas-niyamas-seminar. I will post this or I'll give you the link in the email that will follow up tomorrow, and there's already a link in the Facebook group. And I hope if you have any questions or comments that you will share them in the Facebook group so that we can all discuss them there. Next week, the Yoga of Divine Presence continues with the 4 key verses of the Bhagavad-gita. These are known as the Chatur Shloki, the 4 verses around which the entire Bhagavad-gita revolves. If one understands these 4 verses, then the rest of the Bhagavad-gita in each direction falls into place and makes a great deal of sense than it otherwise would. So in these 4 verses, Krishna, in order, will cover knowledge of the ultimate goal, knowledge of practices that will help one attain the ultimate goal, and knowledge of relationships. The three categories of knowledge in Vedic philosophy. These verses will be verses 8 through 11. And that brings us to the end of our evening. Wilfred, it's always great to see you. Thank you very, very much for your kind comments. And here's our last call for questions. If you have anything, you better be quick because I'm about to end meeting for all. It is very, very nice to see all of you, so many of you here live this evening, and very nice to see you, those of you who are watching this or listening to this after the fact. I thank you all very, very much for your enthusiastic participation, your willingness to spend some time delving into the science of self-realization as Krishna presents it in the Bhagavad-gita. So I bid you adieu, and I look forward to seeing you all again next time. Have a nice night.